Coming up on Good Journeys with Ben Veal.
By knowing who I am and being certain about that and being humble about that. I don't have to be this arrogant person unless that's who you are, but I don't need to approach things that way. And it's an effortless way to approach decision-making or states of conflict or chaos, what most people freak out about. I'm seen to be very common. And I see these in other successful people that I admire. That's what I wanted to figure. How are they doing it? Because they know who they are. Well, who gave them the secret? They did.
Welcome to Good Journeys with Ben Veal, the show that explores the trails traveled and lessons learned from some truly incredible people.
Hello and a warm welcome to everyone here for another purposeful conversation on Good Journeys with Ben Veal. And I have a big question to kick off this episode with. Do you have a sense of destiny when it comes to where you're going in the journey of your life? Well, joining me on the show today is my guest who has more than 35 years of professional coaching experience, and he is the author of an incredible book that takes readers on a remarkable journey of self-discovery. Based out of beautiful Denver, Colorado, David C. Olcott is the founder and CEO of Samurai Success, and he's mission-led to help his clients become more purposeful and their businesses more sustainable. David recently published Swords of Illumination, a truly profound book that really explores how to take charge of your life's direction and begin living the life that you are destined to live, which sounds pretty good to me. David, thank you so much for joining me here on Good Journeys. How are you, sir?
I am very good, sir. So good to meet you in person and see you and be in your presence, man. I'm just excited about our conversation today.
Oh, such a pleasure. And I was just saying before we recorded, by the time this goes out, the weather will have turned. But right now I am recording this on the hottest day of the year in the UK. We've got a rare thing called sunshine, which never happens in our country. So I'm hot, I'm flustered, but I'm very much looking forward to this conversation today.
And I thought that was just me.
So look, I want to begin, as I said in the intro, with this book, Swords of Illumination. So this is a really special book. I've been reading it over the last few weeks and I've been absolutely hooked to it. And I really encourage my audience to check it out. And I'm sure they will after listening to our conversation today. This book that you've written, it's very much kind of these two intertwining stories combined. How would you describe the book and what compelled you to write it in the first place? Because writing a book is no small feat.
As you are becoming aware of yourself, I understand from our conversation earlier, man, and just
Absolutely.
Congratulations on the process of getting through it. Yeah, it was interesting because we actually finished the book in 2009 and didn't publish it until 2024. So August 15, 2044,
Wow.
actually last year with, a full year coming up. So that's 16 years between actually completing it to about 85% to really getting it out to publishing. And the secret or the reason why that was because the reason I wrote the book was I wanted to not forget the great lessons I had learned in this lifetime. Because I don't know, it's going to sound weird, Ben, but I have a sense that I've been here before and I'm going to come back. I just have that sense. I don't know why I have that sense. I can't explain it to you. There's no scientific reason or justification. It's just a pure faith. And I wanted to not forget all the great life lessons that I've learned along the way. So it's actually a love letter, if you will, to myself.
As any great book should be, really. Yeah.
Well, there it is. So purely selfish reasons for writing that book. Because, I didn't know you were going to read it. And I'm so blessed that you have, because as we're getting all this feedback from people and how it's relating to people, it's magical. And it also lets you know, just with absolute gratitude, that you're not alone. Because if I've written this and it touches you, then we're having a shared experience. And that, brother, is exciting to me, because as alone as we can feel in this lifetime and how desperate that can become, all of a sudden the world becomes really small to realize, oh my gosh, I'm having similar experiences and I can start talking to people and we can start relating to each other.
And that's what I love. That's what I love about books, because I know most of us have moved away from the good old-fashioned hard copy book. But actually, when you do get into a book, I always find it so immersive, and especially with the world of fiction, which your book kind of straddles the lines between fiction and non-fiction in the lessons it shares. But you conjure up these images of the characters, don't you? And the image that I have will be very different to the image that you had as the author. And both of those images are spot on because it's your interpretation of the journey that you're on.
And isn't that the secret of this place? We're all interpreting this place the way we go along. And then we run into someone like you, where it shares that same picture. And that's part of this, belonging structure, this family, this tribalness that we get into kind of stuff. And that can be very fruitful. And as we're seeing in our country, especially the United States today, that this can be very powerful and weaponized. So It's an interesting contrast of the same technology used in very good ways and not so good ways, right?
But that's always been the case, hasn't it? That's throughout human existence, things have been used for good and not so good. And you just have to, as I say, like with this show, what I'm trying to do is put some positive content out there and showcase some good people. And I think through literature, through podcasts, whatever it may be, we all have the power to do that. But again, we'll have to guard our hearts against the negatives of this world and the weaponization of media. There was a character in your book. So the book, for anyone who hasn't read it, kind of jumps between this character, Tom Henderson, and then moves around towards kind of traditional Japanese samurai culture. And this character, Tom Henderson, you read about him very early on in the book. And, he's just truly bogged down and overwhelmed by the pressures of life, trying to provide for his family, trying to live up to society's expectations of what success looks like. And going to be honest, David, I saw a lot of myself in him from where I was 5 years ago when I was just at completely my lowest point in life before circumstances led to me founding Second Mountain and starting off my own kind of purpose-driven path now. That was me 5 years ago. And, a lot of his journey in the book really resonated with me on a personal level. But how much of yourself did you see in that character?
Yeah, it's, as an author, as you know, you put so much of yourself literally into a book, right? So all the characters in that book are the way that I experienced them is the way we wrote them, right? Which is why I think it's becoming so powerful, is that because it's so relatable to those things, because I'm the good guy in the book and I'm the bad guy in the book, and that contrast, brother, is what's so important about our earlier conversation that we're just having about this world has always been this way. There'll always be good and there'll always be evil. So the question my brain was asking was, well, why? Why can't it all just be good? Because I'm good and I want the world to be good and I want to be treated good. And man, I just went through this whole dynamic of woe is me and what's going on here. And I was like, this can't be right. I must be missing something. There is no way the Father, the loving God that I know, would ever put me in this planet without something just beautiful and magnificent. So I must be missing something. And that's what drove me, because I am Tom Henderson for sure. I was living this life. I'm living on South Beach. I'm selling real estate. I'm meeting movie stars, rock stars. I'm living this, what people would call this a truly amazing life. And I was absolutely depressed. I was angry. And the reason was because I just didn't understand this place. So that was it. I gave all that stuff up and I went on a totally different journey. And I wanted to find out how this place works and how I work in it. And that's what the Swords of Illumination is about how to actually understand how I have a lot more influence, if not control, in this physical plane and in this physical spiritual energy of this place. I actually have more control than I'm aware of. And in the book, you start finding out how to create that control, how to create that new experience of life that we're all having, but we're all choosing the same experience. I now know, with all this experience of saying, I can change the meaning of things. And when I changed the meaning of things, Ben, it changed everything. It changed my experience. It changed how I felt. And because I started feeling good more often, as opposed to where I was, I started seeing opportunity because I felt good. So you walk into a room, right? And there's just massive amount of opportunity, but I couldn't see it when I was in that dark place because it's just the way my body's programmed. I can't see that. If I'm not in a good place, I can't see good. But when I'm in a good place, that's when I started seeing the opportunities and it started building. And I was like, holy crap. I'm starting to realize my number one job is to make sure that I am at my best. And when I'm at my best over longer periods of time, then all of a sudden I start seeing the opportunities that have always existed in this plane. And one of those experiences was this, something called the law of contrast. The law of contrast is so important to understand this physical plane as a human being and having experiences and creating meanings within this place. In this place, when you come here as a soul, my understanding is that you are here for one purpose. All of us are here for one purpose as a soul, and that is to experience that which we say we are. Without the law of contrast, the law of polarity, you cannot have something called an experience. If I want to know myself as tall, and by the way, I'm 5'8" nothing, right? So I don't usually have that experience around people. But if I want to experience myself as tall, and everybody's the same height as I am, we're all 6 feet tall on the entire planet, there wouldn't be a need for a word called tall anymore, because all tall. We're all 6 feet tall. But tall would not even be a reference point anymore, because there would be nothing else but 6 feet tall. So how can there be light without the darkness? How can there be tall without short? How can there be heavy without thin? There can't be. So this law that we exist in this physical plane is purpose built so that you and I can come here as souls into this avatar body and have an experience. Yeah. And when I started to understand that, Ben, all of a sudden, a lot of the anger and rage that I had for this place started to shift. It didn't change. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't an overnight thing. It took me a little. I'm pretty stubborn, so it takes me a little bit longer to get things.
Join the club.
Once I got it, the level of mastery that provided for me was staggering. Because then I started understanding why someone would cut me off in traffic. Somebody would yell at me for no particular reason. Someone would, I'd be on a subway somewhere and somebody just freak out and be like, I don't have to take that personally, because it isn't about me. It's just this experience of contrast.
Yeah. And
so then I started understanding what scriptures meant, that I've sent you nothing but angels. Remember, the greatest angel that we know about, right? Satan, the devil, was the most beautiful of all of them. They just had darker wings, right? They're all angels.
Yeah.
So the contrast of what we might call evil and good, they're both angels here to allow us to experience that which we say we are.
Yeah. And, circling back to what you said about depression, I think when you are in a dark place, it's very hard to, in my experience, when you're in a very dark place with depression, it's very hard to see beyond yourself. And until you can see beyond yourself, you can't see beyond others. And it's starting to look towards others is where you start to find your impact and purpose. And I think what you're describing there is, it's so easy to just focus on what my problems are, my overwhelm. So that, going back to your character, Tom Henderson, it's all at the outset about how everything is impacting him, how it's affecting him. It's not really about where he fits in the world or about how he's helping others or how he's supporting others. It's more about just this overwhelming sense of responsibility that he has. And there's a section in your book that really struck out to me. There's advice given to the character Yoshi where it says, you should care about what you can control. How others receive or interpret your decisions you cannot control. And I absolutely love that, David, because I feel like so many of us are kind of guilty of wasting time worrying about the things we can't control in this world. And just be so powerful if we could shift our focus towards controlling what is within our power.
Beautiful, man. And I've spent a lot of my life doing that exact thing. That's why I could speak on it, right? And that is really starting to focus on what I can control. And I heard this years ago in a seminar, and that was, you get to control your thoughts. You get to control your feelings about stuff. Not a lot of people are aware of that today, apparently. But then we can also control who we are. And that's it. That's as much control as we really have. And it's fascinating when you look at that. It was like, well, but how does all that control the rest of this outside world? It has everything to do with the outside world. Because if I'm healed, if I'm complete, if I'm full, and I show up to a party, right? I show up to a room, then I don't need anything from that room. And because I don't need anything from the room, I can see what's going on in the room. If I need something from somebody in that room, then I'm distracted.
Yeah.
I'm not showing up full. So when we talk about, for the control freaks on this audience, including myself, if you really want to understand control, the thing you get to control on this planet is you. The Swords of Illumination are a way for you to understand how you get to influence and control you. We call that programming. So programming is something that is part of our subconscious mind that really does run all of our decision making. And in the book, you start to learn the elements of that programming. That programming is what creates your perspective. It's what creates your meaning of things, your thoughts, your personality. All these different things are actually controlled by this subconscious programming. Maybe for the first time, as you read through this, you start to realize, oh my gosh, I can actually change that programming. And when you change the programming, the entire world out here starts to shift. And that's the power of this control thing you and I are talking about.
And of course, it's a gradual process, isn't it? I mean, you've obviously published the book called Swords of Illumination, but it's very much based around this Swords of Illumination coaching model that you use with your business Samurai Success. So, how maybe you can just briefly talk me through the model, what sets it apart, and how you as a coach are helping your clients to reach their goals.
So in our coaching system, right, we're from really focused on business owners. Having people become from self-employed to business owners is our main focus. And, a lot of people use the word scaling and volume and all these different things. The challenge with that is that we don't understand how powerful our belief systems are. And belief systems are like thermostats. And so let's imagine, and by the way, you don't have AC, right, in your home.
We don't need it very often, apart from days like today.
Okay. Gosh, I'm about to lose half my audience here. So in America, of course, we have these thing called thermostats that are connected to both heaters and air conditioning systems. And that thermostat is the balancing thing, right? We're going to talk about the wheel of balance a little bit later, but that thermostat really controls whether it's communicating with the AC unit or the heater. So let's say, for example, you set that temperature at 70 degrees. And all of a sudden it starts getting too hot, like where you guys are at today, 32 degrees Celsius kind of stuff. It's like, whoa, all of a sudden the AC has to kick on and kick it back and get that thermostat back to 70 degrees. That's its job. It's mechanical. You're not going to win this battle. If it gets too cold in the room, then all of a sudden the heat kicks on and it brings it from 60 degrees, let's say, back up to 70. Now that belief metaphor that we're talking about is the same thing that happens in your brain when it comes to money. If you set your thermostat, and by the way, along the line, by the time you're 7 years old, you've already set thermostat for most of the subjects in your life.
Really?
That's neuroscience. Yes, sir. So by the time you're 7, you have most of your programming already in place.
And is that predominantly what you've learned from your family home, so that those surrounding you are primarily your parents and where you're growing up?
Well, I learned that technology and that statistics actually from neuroscience, because we know that the brain has certain frequencies that it moves through at different ages. Okay. And theta is a frequency where your brain is most open to reprogramming your subconscious or programming your subconscious. So once you get into that theta state, which happens the most as a human being between the ages of 0 and 7 years old. And as we move out of 7, we start moving much more into the sleep patterns, delta, alpha, beta kind of stuff, and gamma. And we get away from the theta stuff. We're only in theta frequency in short bursts of time right before we go to sleep. It's an advantage to be able to take advantage of that, but that's some other advanced kind of technology. So by the time you're 7, in most of the subjects of your life, including wealth, relationships, how much you're going to weigh, how much love you can have in your life, you've already programmed yourself from other well-meaning people, your parents, society, the church, whoever you've surrounded yourself with, and society have all influenced that programming.
Wow.
Now, here's where it gets startling. And that programming then follows you, and you're acting like a 7-year-old or a 6-year-old when it comes to money, like understanding how much relationships work and male-female dynamics, and all those things are already in there. And then when you're introduced to a new piece of information, if it doesn't match up with your programming, there's conflict. That conflict creates stress and frustration because we don't know what to do. This isn't supposed to happen this way because it isn't according to my picture of the world, and it's different. And that's where this conflict happened. The conflict happens inside here, not out there. The event happens there. The experience happens in here. And that experience is managed, monitored, and controlled by your subconscious programming. So when you notice this, it's kind of like an alarm clock. If you have something that doesn't feel right, that goes, it's not necessarily telling you the truth about something. It's just telling you this doesn't fit into what I think I know. Am I wanting to change that? Am I wanting to be able to explore something different with it? That's great, because is this behavior serving me anymore is really the question. Yeah. And if it isn't, you get to change that behavior. And this is the first challenge that we run into, is because there's so many folks, coaches out there that want to tell you, let me teach you the strategy about how to change your behavior. There's a challenge with that we know at Samurai Success over these 35 years of doing this, is that if your behavior, which is the part of doing this, isn't matched up with your belief system, your thermostat, the behavior will not stick, even if it is successful. You've got to align your beliefs and your behaviors together. And we know that is the chain of command. We help our clients really see the connections of how you actually work. So if you set your thermostat at 70 and all of a sudden that's $70,000 a year, that's as much as you're ever going to make, because here's what's going to happen. As soon as you start making more than $70,000 a year, guess what? You're going to cool things down because it's too hot. You're not reaching your programmed thermostat. If you're only making $60,000 a year, but you've programmed yourself at 70, then all of a sudden you're going to heat things up, and you're going to see this wave of, I got to heat things up. I got to slow things down. And there's this sabotage thing that happens. And I was fascinated by that in myself. I was like, come on now. I know that I could make more money than this. What's wrong with me? But that's the conscious part of my brain talking, Ben. It's not the subconscious part that's controlling all this. So as I started working, as you know, and with Tony Robbins and getting World of NLP and neuro-linguistic programming, I started to understand there was a way to actually get access to that subconscious. Swords of Illumination are the elements of that software reprogramming. That's why I'm so excited about sharing with people, because now you can really start taking control of how you're going to start manifesting things from an unconscious part and a conscious part, and get congruency, those two parts of your brain in alignment, and it actually accelerates things.
And that's what I think is so great about the pathway that you've chosen with, this kind of fictional narrative that gets across all these methodologies, because you're talking about some, very deep and complicated stuff here from a neuro-linguistic standpoint. But I think the beauty of presenting it through a fictional narrative is that you're taking people on this step-by-step journey through how to question the decisions they're making, and how to start to work towards, their dreams. That really interests me, what you were saying about the financial fears, because obviously we talk a lot, especially in the creative world, about imposter syndrome and that feeling that which I've gone through countless times, that feeling that I'm not good enough, because of course there's always someone doing things 100 times better than you. You've only got to go online for 5 seconds and see a peer who is significantly more successful than you. But the bit you don't know is actually what success looks like in that person's life. And actually, to take YouTube, for example, so you might see someone with 1 billion or 5 billion views on there, but actually, was that their goal? And is that actually what they're ultimately aiming for? Or is that just a byproduct of what they're doing? So I think it's really powerful that you're taking this work, but you've broken it down into a narrative that I think is really, really accessible. And I think it's also a book. I've said this to our good mutual friend Ryan Hartley, who has the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast, who introduced us. I said, I think this is a book that I'm going to get more from on second and third reading, because like the first read, to read it and prepare and to speak with you, I think by read 3, a lot of it would have really sunk in. It'll be one of those books that I keep coming back to at different stages, because there's also a stage of life, like, I'm coming up to 40. Some big life events over the last year in terms of children growing up and losing my father. So there's quite lots of kind of big things that are affecting me at this moment in time, which are having an interpretation of how I'm reading the lessons in this book. I imagine that 3 to 5 years on, my interpretation of this will be different. But also, I think I'm also partly down a lot of this journey that you're talking about, in terms of over the last 4 years, learning what success looks like, what the mountain, my business being called Second Mountain, what the mountain is that I want to climb. but it isn't
Yes.
about financial success, but it's actually about outward purpose and helping others and shifting that very learned value system that success is always about job title and hierarchical growth and financial security. There's a part we touched on it earlier, but for me, one of the most valuable parts of this book is the I don't know, would you call it the wheel of balance, the wonderful balance
Yes.
wheel that's in here? But there's 10 elements to this, and I've seen different variations of this over the years, but I thought yours was incredible in terms of the sheer amount of buckets, but also I can see where each of those kind of interlink and jump off one another. Can you talk me through a bit about how you kind of reached this wheel and what the elements of balance are from your perspective?
It's interesting because I've been studying martial arts for most of my life, and balance is a big word in that realm, right? And I hear balance everywhere, and I hear life balance and self-care and all these different words that we're using. And again, neuro-linguistic, right? All listening to words, but we're using all these words in really interesting ways. We're kind of clumping them all together like to mean all the same thing. And they're not. They're very discernible words. And when you start breaking that down, you start realizing the power of words, right? So when you start taking a look at the wheel of balance, this is kind of the first level of getting from where most of us are. We want to be able to get this next plateau of mastery, this ascension point, right? When you're climbing the mountain, you got to get to these places where you get to a place of acclimation, right? And these plateaus of mastery you want to be able to get to. So the wheel of balance helped me get to a place of structurally develop that first phase of getting to balance. The ultimate goal for the master is get to a place of centeredness. Centeredness is not balanced. Your body has this ability to get balanced on its own. It gets to a place of homeostasis. For example, it can be very overweight, and the rest of your entire system will get in balance of being very overweight. That doesn't mean it's reaching the ultimate centeredness of being healthy. It's just getting to a place of homeostasis, a place of balance. So we can all get a place of balance, but centeredness is where the master wants to get to. And that's why that model is very different. There's the balance part of the wheel, but then there's the center part of the wheel. And that what's the centeredness based on? What's its alignment to? What's its congruency for? What's its purpose? And in the center of that wheel is your identity and mission and purpose. That is the center hub of the wheel of balance. The wheel of balance are the spokes of the wheel. And depending on the length of the spoke, how much time, commitment, goals that you have around those will actually create a more balanced ride. If you can imagine that you have a really long spoke over here and a really short spoke over here, hey, I'm really focused on my finance, but I'm really not focused on my family, you're going to have a bit of a bumpy ride. How to really get that in alignment is that it has to start from the hub. It has to start with purpose in mind, designing with the end in mind. And that is, who do you say you are, your identity? And then your mission and purpose with that identity. And that becomes the hub of how you want to then balance the rest of your life, because multiple of those wheels, mostly those spokes, don't have to be fully 10. Let's just say from 0 to 10, right? They don't have to be 10s to be able to create the balance you're looking for as an individual. So this is what makes it so beautiful that, hey, I don't need to focus on all 10 of them, making 10 perfect. That's unless you're a perfectionist and that's the way you're going to go and that's your identity and that's the way it's going to happen. But if you're looking at much more of a centered approach, and I will tell you in the world of martial arts, that's what we strive for. When you can be centered in any environment, man, you are going to handle that situation a lot better than if you're balanced or have forgotten who you are.
And so much martial arts is, of course, about self-discipline and service. And I think sometimes we get a bit muddled in our world today when we talk about work-life balance. I think often what we're talking about is being happy, doing what we love, having lots of time for family and recreational pursuits. And I think actually what balance is much more, and what we're talking about here is actually, are you fulfilling the mission that you've been put on this earth for? And are you actually living your own values? And that doesn't mean that every day is going to be an easy ride. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have some hardships, but it means that are you working towards kind of a wider goal? I mean, without giving too much away, there's this moments of kind of revelation for Tom near the end of the book where he kind of realizes that the focus of his life is all wrong and that his attention kind of has gone on to everything he has to do rather than the person he wants to be. And, that really resonated with me because, we're just all so busy, aren't we? Like we're just all so busy, and we have these never-ending to-do lists, and it feels like we're the busiest, most overwhelmed generation there's ever been. Coincidentally, after technology came in and made our lives easier and more efficient, but I guess from your experiences as a coach, are there any kind of key tips you can share in terms of ways to try and move forward day by day and better yourself, even when you're kind of faced with these overwhelming amounts of priorities on your time and you feeling quite, misbalanced and off kilter?
It's going to sound strange, but the worst thing you can do is start to spend time figuring out who you are. What are you talking about? I mean, that's what your whole book is. All right. So if you take your same philosophy, your same programming into this without any structure, and you go into and you start investigating who you are, you're going to go down a very dark hole, a very dark rabbit hole that most people don't get out of because there's no structure to help them get back out. So imagine that getting into that hole without a ladder. The ladder is the structure. That structure is the Swords of Illumination. How to build the structure. When you're going in to find out who you are, these are the elements that you want to focus on. So you build structure as you're identifying who you are. And that is probably the most powerful lesson I've learned in this entire life. And it's still, I don't know if it's ever going to be ellipsed, to be honest with you, Ben, that we have not come here to discover who we are. Like there's no hidden treasure where you're supposed to go find this, this odyssey you're supposed to be on and go find out who you are. This is not how this place is designed. It's actually designed this way. You are here to create who you are. Now, this is not something new to the most successful people on the planet. If you just watch some of these successful people, you're going to see this theme. And that's what I was recognizing. They know who they are, and they cannot be talked out of it, not by others and not by themselves. So that's the whole thing about getting to know who you are, understanding, creating who you are, staying with who you are, and doing the things that reflect who you say you are changes the entire game. It doesn't mean there's less chaos. It doesn't mean it's not less frustrating. It doesn't mean any of those things, brother. It's just a different experience, a different way to approach because you remember why you're doing things all the time. You're doing those things because it represents who you are. And that in that way, then all of a sudden, these what seems like really tough decisions in my life have gone away because when someone is wanting to talk me into doing a behavior that doesn't represent who I am, it's easy to say no to that. It didn't used to be easy. Why? Because I didn't know who I was. By knowing who I am and being certain about that and being humble about that. I don't have to be this arrogant person unless that's who you are, but I don't need to approach things that way. And it's an effortless way to approach decision-making or states of conflict or chaos, what most people freak out about, seem to be very common. And I see these in other successful people that I admire. That's what I wanted to figure. How are they doing it? Because they know who they are. Well, who gave them the secret? They did.
So when was it that you found that for you? What stage were you at in life where you finally felt comfortable about who you were, David?
Ooh, two different questions. Or when did I find out that creation of who I am is one of the things? Was just about 27 years ago. I mean, I remember the date. I remember the book that I was reading when I read it, right? It was called Conversations with God. I mean, it floored me. And so much that I started mentoring with that author for the last 26 years. He's been in my life, right? I've been to all of his seminars. I do as much work around him as just remarkable technology that came through him, much like Swords of Illumination came through us. This book wasn't written by me alone. This has had multiple people in it, and it just downloaded. I think that's why it's having that connection with you, Ben, right? Because it has that spiritual connection. So finding that out early. And then, of course, it was so remarkable. And it just, that feeling you get whenever you get those goosebumps and your hair back, it's like, oh, I know that's the truth of it. But it took me years to be able to understand what that meant. Such an easy concept took me years to really get into that experience. And I will tell you, probably around the age of 40, 42 was really when I started getting engaged. And now it expands and compounds at 57, right? And I'm just at that place where, wow, this is powerful. It doesn't mean it doesn't get tested, brother. There are always opportunities for people to come into my world as angels and say, hey, I'm going to do this thing to you just to see if that's really who you are.
Yeah.
Thank them for that, as opposed to being angry with them like I used to be in the past.
Yeah.
Because they're helping me experience me as who I've created myself as. And without them, I don't get that. Now, that's a very different belief system than I used to have 20 years ago, where I used to be angry at those people for challenging me. How dare you? You're disrespecting me. And now I see it completely different, and I'm experiencing it completely different. And because I don't get hooked by that stuff anymore, or as much as I used to, then I'm seeing things differently, because the energy that it took for me to get out of that dark place is so much smaller now. Now I go right back into the room with light energy as opposed to that darker energy, and I start seeing the opportunities everywhere again. So it's a fascinating journey for sure.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that there's so much there. I mean, I asked that because, I'm coming up to my 40th birthday, and I feel like I'm finally stepping into the person that I have always wanted to be. But for so many years, describing the kind of Tom Henderson kind of scenario earlier, for so many years, I felt like there was a vision of me that I wanted to be, but I was so far away. And every time I tried to climb near it, I was pulled further and further back by the pressures of money or pressures of work or pressures of family. And I finally feel like I've got that freedom now to be an expression of actually who I want to be. But it feels like it's taken all my life to get to this point. But equally, I'm now doing the things that I loved to do when I was 8 years old, 9 years old. I'm just doing them for a career. So it's just, I sometimes think, what would my life have been if I would have been able to just jump from one space to another? But it wouldn't have happened without this journey. And I think, one of the things that jumps out to me when I was kind of prepping for this interview and getting to speak with you, I mean, we talk about journeys and living life to the full. And I mean, you're definitely practicing what you preach, David, because, your life so far, as well as Samurai Success, going back in your career, you served as the chief of staff for a member of the Florida State Senate. We've talked already about the masters you achieved in neuro-linguistic programming. You're a second degree black belt in Aikido, and you've competed in motorcycle races across Colorado. I mean, you've lived a life, haven't you, my friend?
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, multiple lives within this. It's almost unfair, but I will tell you that we all have access to this, is my point. And that's 16 years. Remember when we finished the book, right? About 80% of it. And then, man, I was so tired of having technology being presented to me like, this is the thing you get to know this, and everyone was selling me, and I was buying it because I wanted to do something different. 16 years ago, I was like, okay, now this technology has come through me. We've written all this stuff down. I don't trust it yet. I don't believe in it yet. I know it's written down. I know I was the person who wrote this, but I haven't experienced that yet. And that's what those 16 years have been about, is me personally applying this information that's in this book with you that says, does this really work? So motorcycle racing, stunt riding motorcycles, parachuting, scuba diving, diving great white sharks, being able to power lift, martial arts strategies, multiple martial arts. So all these things, long range precision shooting. I mean, I could go on a list. None of this stuff is to impress you, Ben. It isn't. It isn't about how, gosh, look how great. None of this. I want to let you know how powerful you are and how limited we give ourselves. But now we have access to technology that's going to allow each person who reads this information and applies this information to live an extraordinary life. This is the access point, because your programming determines your willingness and can-do attitude toward everything. And I will share with you, every single one of those things I just listed off so fast scared the bejesus out of me. I mean, literally, Ben.
Yeah.
To be able to pull a wheelie at 100 miles an hour on a motorcycle and shift gears and do it scared me. It took me months to be able to do that. I say months, but that's a short period of time for me. But I'm not being the best. I'm not going to be the best stunt rider in the world. I'm not going to be the fastest motorcycle in the world. That's not my outcome. My outcome is to experience me being my best. And I did that through these various experiences.
Mm.
I went into the learning curve, the thing that scares me to death, right? I'm going to go in and learn something brand new. I'm no longer an expert at it. Oh, God, that's scary. But this is what we've got to challenge ourselves as human beings, because we're all falling short of just getting into this box and then staying within the box. And if we do that, then nothing's going to change on this planet. We can bitch, moan, whine all we want, but nothing's going to change until it changes in here. And once I have an experience that it can change in here, and the structure about how to do that, Swords of Illumination for me, then I can then do that in every single environment I want to. That's how powerful God has made me, and God has made you. And we've forgotten that divinity within us. We've got to get back to that. If we're going to change this place, we've got to realize if we continue to solve problems using our ego, that's all we're going to do. We're just going to contribute to more ego stuff. And there's plenty of ego on this planet. It doesn't need more ego. It's like, I don't need more cowbell, right?
Yeah.
I need more soul in this. And we need to start hiring leaders to be able to do that. We need to start looking for those people that do that on an effortless basis. And they do exist. I want to help more of us remember who we are at that divinity level so we can become that best, stay our best, and truly change this place.
And that's what I wonder about the kind of Japanese culture that's obviously influenced your business, and the going back to the days of the samurai, which is obviously a core strand of the book and of your business. Like, what is it about the samurai that appeals to you and has such kind of resonance, I guess, compared to this kind of crazy, chaotic, ego-filled kind of modern world that we're living in?
So many different aspects, but the very first one was I was reading a book called Samurai Selling, and I was actually in the sales world at the time. And in that book, it had the translation of what it means to be samurai. Now, before, in all my studies in Sunday school and things like this, I had a very important man in my life, the preacher at our church, whose name was John Smith, and he just had a futuristic look on the world. And totally by coincidence, I'm down in the Florida Keys, this little town, and here's this thinker, just like, he was talking about aliens 40 years ago, kind of stuff. And we're like, what's he talking? This is a preacher. You're not supposed to do that. And he was just out there, man. And it really started to explore this idea. And in one of his sermons, I remember telling, the greatest life you could live is a life in service of others. Now that haunted me, obviously. And I don't remember when I actually learned that. But in this book, it popped up again, because the definition, the translation of being samurai is living a life in service of others. Wow. I was like, what the? It was just two coins. I mean, goosebumps, man. It just hit me so hard that those two. Now, that put me on the journey of learning this martial art called Aikido, which is the art of the samurai. If you lost your weapon, that's the art that you use. And so I've been on this journey. So all of it starts to connecting about all these pieces that I was getting about. If I wanted to create who I am at my best, that I want a symbol that represents me truly being in service, then my statement is, I am samurai. Now, obviously, I'm not Asian, brother, right? And I don't mean to take away from any culture. I am so in love with the symbolization of what it means to truly be in service, because that's the greatest life you can live.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start that way. Let's start from me being the samurai. Well, here's the whole truth of it. In order to truly be in service of others, you've got to learn how to get the hell out of the way. You and I are talking, but let's say you and I were actually in a coaching session, and I haven't worked on me. I haven't really solved, or healed is the word that most of us use in the spiritual path, right? It says, I haven't really worked on me. I haven't healed my stuff. Well, all my stuff is in the way. All my hell is in between you and I. And so you're talking to me, and I'm just healing myself, because I'm just working on me in our conversation. At Samurai Success, we work exclusively to be able to help our coaches work on their stuff. So when they come and they meet with our clients, they're not in the way. So we're literally healing our own work and getting the hell out of our way so we can truly be present for you. And I will tell you, whether you're a coach or you're a father or you're a mother or you're being a lover with somebody, being present with someone, to truly be connected with them, to not have your stuff between you and them, is a totally different level of intimacy that I was not experiencing at all in my lifetime until that moment. And that has been one of the most joyous things. And I don't mean just sexually, I mean just being connected to someone, just truly being present like you and I are being right now. There's no more powerful connection for me on this planet than having that moment of mastery between two people. And I can't do that, honestly, if I've got my stuff in my way. Because here's how this looks. You and I are having a conversation, but I'm thinking about, did I leave the toaster on? Is the oven on over there? I've got mail to do over there. I've got 6 things I've got to be able to do, right? Is this interview over? I mean, it changes the whole dynamic.
Yes.
But if I have none of that stuff in my way, then you and I can truly be present. And that's the journey of being samurai. Truly being in service of someone else, you've got to commit to the discipline. And it is discipline. It's hard work to truly work on you so that you can truly then be in service of others.
And it's going against the grain of modern society, isn't it? Because we are encouraged through our devices and through the life we live now to always be distracted, to always be doing 10 things at once, to never really have our full attention focused on one given situation. And you're seeing this return now with more mindfulness and more people practicing breath work and people trying to find ways to become more present. I mean, for me, it's just, I have to literally lock my device away at night to not, I've got to that point, but I do now have to put my device in a lockbox so that I can actually be present with my family in the evenings, because I can't keep living this half life of distraction where no one wins. But my mind is blown by the meaning of samurai, which is just completely what you don't expect, isn't it? When you hear the impression of you think of a samurai in your head, but it's incredible, but it's actually all about a life of service. And I love that that's how you've built your entire business model around.
Yes, sir. And it's been a wonderful journey to remind myself of who I am, because that's the key to it. In the Swords of Illumination, as you work through it, there's actually a guide about how to write this stuff down, because all these distractions, you just said it so beautifully, man. I really want to go back to this. You know yourself well enough to says, I've got to take this distraction device and I've got to lock it up, because if not, I'm going back to that thing. That's knowing yourself, brother.
Well, I know it's more powerful than me. I think that's the reality.
Okay.
Is I've accepted this device has been created by people significantly more intelligent than me when it comes to psychology, to keep bringing me back again and again with these tiny little dopamine hits, and to feed into all the elements of ego that I want in terms of the likes, clicks and shares and all those numbers. And as someone who's a creative, obviously I love to see good metrics and I loved all those numbers, but you just have to say, well, is that as good as spending 10 minutes playing on the floor with my son whilst he's 5? No. But in the moment, for whatever crazy reason, it can seem that responding to that LinkedIn message or Facebook notification is more important than the thing that you've spent your whole life working for. And I think we're a generation that's really struggling with. I think a lot about kind of what I'm going to think on my deathbed, and I think when I lost my father last year, and he had his wife and his 2 children at his bedside holding his hands. And I think that's, for me, that's how you leave this world. That's a sign of a life well lived. And I often go down that kind of route of thinking about, what am I going to be regretting on my deathbed? And I can guarantee it's all of those hours I spent looking at the black mirror of my phone. Who will care about social media connections in 50 years time? But we are forced to believe that actually the thoughts and opinions of other people, or our perspective within the world and how people see us, is more important than just being present with those we love right now, or just being present with ourselves and just I've started practicing in the mornings, going for walks on my own without my phone and without headphones and just looking at nature. Crazy idea. Used to do it all the time.
That's beautiful, man. And your intuition serves you well, because this conversation we're having right now and bringing up social media, those very intelligent psychologists, if you will, that designed this thing are attacking your programming. And I really mean that. They're just going after that hook to get you hooked and get this ego stuff and feed you this stuff. And, it's funny because we talk about how we don't trust people. Yet we're picking up the phone when it's like we're Pavlov's dog, and I mean this for all of us, right? I'm not separate from this. And then, we're just being conditioned to be able to look at the thing and give us something that just makes us, and it doesn't feel good, man. After a while, it's like eating fast food. Okay, it fills your belly, but it isn't nourishing. It isn't And I will tell you, we've got to get back on the path if we're really going to change things. We've got to move away from this. We've got to put that phone down longer. And eventually, when you know who you really are, when you know you're connected to divinity, when you know that there's a whole life adventure, you move away from that virtual world into this virtual world. And you start having different experiences, because there's nothing on social media that's going to make us feel anything different than most of the thing is envy, greed, all these other things that we like, oh, somebody else is doing better than I am. Man, I will tell you, I was so thankful to move away from that lifestyle of being able to start deciding who I was based upon how everybody else saw me or how everybody else judged me or anything else. Because that's the moment of when you really create your identity, like we talked about 40-42, when I really engaged in not doing things for other people, not doing things for myself anymore, but simply doing things because it represented who I am. And you want to talk about a purpose-driven life? There it is. All those other ones are going to be just talk therapy. They're going to be, oh, I'm doing a purpose-driven, but you don't feel it. You don't experience it. If you really are after that, the book is a great way to start structuring that to get to that purpose-driven identity, because you created it. No one else did. You are responsible for it. You control it. You're the one putting those things out there.
Well, look, I don't think we could have reached a better place to finish our conversation from there. You know, that's compelled me to even more to put away my phone tonight and get it locked away where it rightly belongs and just focus on living my purpose.
One down, 8 billion to go. Let's
exactly,
get to it.
Exactly. So look, I mean, I'd love to just ask kind of for my audience, David, do you have any kind of final words of encouragement to those who are listening or watching today in terms of being centered around who you are and living the life that you're destined to live?
When we talk about being our authentic self, we have to understand that what we're really talking about is that we're divinity. We are creatures of God. We are children of God. We are the stuff of God. And when we forget that, we create a place like we're living in, because it's ego driven. We've got to be able to get back to the work of being able to get centered and being able to get access back to soul, that soul energy that can really feed things through, and how things get downloaded, right? Channeled through information, just powerful things. Because Einstein said it best when he said, if you're going to think about solving a problem, the energy that it took to create the problem is not the energy it's going to take to solve the problem. So if we're going to take that and say, hey, if I'm looking around this world, most of the problems we're creating in this lifetime and chaos were designed by the ego, then we got to stop going to the ego as the source of the solution or frequency and energy to solve the problem. We've got to get connected back to our soul. And that's what I love about what your work you're doing is, and your audience is, they're already doing that. Here's what I want to be able to add to the conversation. There's a practical way of approaching this. There's a scientific way to approach this, because in this physical plane, I promise you, you're going to leave this place and you're going to go back to a spiritual domain. You're going to have all the spiritualness you want. Here is where you get to experience something that you don't get to experience in any other dimension or realm. You get to experience who you say you are. That is incredibly rare. Take every moment of every day to remember that. Whatever you got, a sticky note, spreadsheet, whatever thing, you've got to remember how magnificent this place is and how unique you are in it. And when you do that, this place will shift.
I love that. I love that. And I want to encourage everyone who's listening and kind of be motivated by your words today, David, to head to your website, which is samuraisuccess.com, where you can find Swords of Illumination. It's also available from other gigantic sales websites, shall we say, and not mention any names, and other places, I'm sure. But yeah, check out David's book. Find him on LinkedIn. What's the best way for people to connect with you directly, David?
Samurai Success is always our best way to be able to do that. We have Instagram, Facebook, and by the way, we're just novices in this playground kind of stuff. So, but it's great. It's accessible. You can be able to, and we're actually on audio now with the book. So people that don't necessarily like to read kind of stuff, you can jump on that big, just dispensary of knowledge on what's on the internet. And also there's also apple.com that has that as well.
Fantastic. Did you read the book or did someone else read it?
We had someone else read it. Yeah, because I really wanted to get away from this being about David. I really wanted it to be about you and your own personal experience, because that's what it is. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, look, thank you so much for sharing your journey and perspective today, David. It's been so nice to connect with you.
Ben, wonderful spending time with you, man. Thanks so much.
And I got a couple of other thank yous, as I always do. So my biggest thank you is always, apart from my wonderful guest, David, is my producer, Jeff Easton from Tall Oak Productions, who always brings these wonderful conversations to life. And thank you to all of you for checking out this Good Journeys episode. There are well over 30 episodes now in our archive of wonderful conversations just like this. So please check us out wherever you get your podcasts. So this has been Good Journeys with Ben Veal. Until next time, let's keep climbing together, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye.